The art of John Himmelfarb is on the move. The truck sculpture rolls through the countryside, the creator at the wheel. The truck, a major motif in John Himmelfarb's life as an artist.
It's been there since childhood, really. I can remember a drawing I did when I was 8 years old that had trucks in it. In 2003, it suddenly became the focus of the work itself rather than just one of many little objects. I did a painting in which the truck filled the whole canvas. I hadn't planned on that. It just appeared and it grabbed me. And I wasn't sure exactly why, but I just went ahead with the next painting. It was also a truck, and then the next one. And then as I kept painting them, I began to wonder, what's the hook here? And the hook is really that they're not about trucks. They're a convenient metaphor for human character and all our aspirations, our burdens, our abilities. I had all kinds of toys, but especially trucks I remember enjoying. I played with them indoors and outdoors in the woods. They were important enough to me that along with my stuffed animals, I saved my trucks, and I still have some of them now.
The son of two Chicago area artists, John's childhood home, where his sister now lives, was filled with more than childhood toys.
I mean, the fact that this was a house in which there was so rich with cultural things, of music, of literature, of visual arts, of drama, really informed his growing up. And I know that he, all of that informs his life and therefore his painting.
Growing up, the art was all around me, but I didn't think about being an artist as a career. I remember more the traditional boy things. You want to be a fireman, or you want to be a forestry expert. And then, in spite of my parents being artists and having artist friends, I somehow, because they revered the world-famous artists so much, I never really thought of choosing. I never thought it was something one could choose to do, to be an artist.
Instead, young Himmelfarb turned to music, playing the violin. His violin and face included in his father's art. He headed east to Harvard for college, graduating in 1968. In his sophomore year, a professor asked him a question that changed his life.
He said, "Did you ever think about being an artist?" And I said no, and I was very surprised because it just hadn't occurred to me yet that that was something you could choose to do. But the fact that he asked the question meant that one could choose to be an artist.
The next year, his professor got him into an independent study program where he threw himself into drawing and sketching, developing some of the themes that can be found in his work today.
I would say within 2 weeks of having many hours a week devoted to working on drawing, the light bulb, literally went off. I said, I think this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Because I just felt more centered than I'd ever felt doing anything else.
But it was the late 60s, a time of social activism and protest. Himmelfarb struggled with the idea that he would not have a career in social justice issues.
And I felt guilty about it for a long time, and then I finally had a moment where I realized how important all the arts were to me in terms of making life seem worthwhile, and that's so it wasn't, with any luck, I wasn't merely being self-indulgent, but I was contributing to the culture in some positive way. So.
Himmelfarb returned to Chicago, the decision made to become a full-time artist. His early work composed of dense linear abstraction, mixed with narrative content.
So the early linear works, like Crane Mountain, they just amassed these linear forms, one on top of the other, very dense. In Crane Mountain, if you look at the bottom of it, there's a little electromagnetic crane that you can see has been piling up this enormous landfill of stuff. Then later, when I began to do color prints, the forms that were piled up were blocks of color, shapes, solid shapes, rather than linear content. And in filming A Sunny Days, for instance, you see a lot of things piled up, but there's also people, birds, things going on. You see the back end of a trailer truck having passed through underneath a bridge. And if you look closely at the door details on the back of the trailer truck, I realize now it's just exactly what have focused on the last couple of years, just that particular motif of the back end of the truck.
Himmelfarb found a lifelong partner, Molly Day, who embraced his vision of life as an artist. Their wedding announcement, a statement of their commitment through good times and bad. Love, optimism, and flexibility defined their relationship right from the start.
My resources were pretty small, so we bought a 4-story brick house in a neighborhood still on the way down in Pilsen. So it liberated me to have the cheap space. Also, all the construction work and deconstruction work gave me more confidence to work with a variety of materials, and that's something that's been very valuable for whatever projects I've encountered ever since.
Early on, Himmelfarb began taking his art on the road. Omaha, Nebraska, one of his first stops.
You analyze my career by looking at my resume. You could see that about a third of everything I've done somehow grew out of that experience in Omaha. By driving so often, I would stop and visit museums along the way in order to try to earn my gas money by selling a print here and there, or just try to see what I could stir up.
Organizing shows in people's homes, he began to build a strong group of passionate collectors.
These are early Himmelfarbs. I would say late 70s, so kind of beginning to be middle or late early period. Here we see again a person crossing a bridge. We see a monster here. We see a truck, the back of a truck. These are trucks that John got the idea of drawing and making pictures of when he was driving from Omaha to Chicago.
The home shows led to gallery and museum shows, increasing recognition for Himmelfarb's work, just as the Nebraska art scene was becoming more lively.
Just the fact that you've done this is going to fertilize an art scene, and then more people are going to open up, and then more people are going to be interested in collecting because it's a scene.
I think the nature of who you are comes out in your work. It's accessible, it's generous to this perspective.
I'm not making fun of anybody who's looking at my work.
Major museums in other cities began acquiring Himmelfarb's work. The Eskenazi Museum of Art, Bloomington, Indiana.
So this one is, again, really based in his interest in language, even his writing on found library cards. He's always had an interest in that. He originally said his letter form images started with picking up a Chinese newspaper in Chinatown in Chicago, and the fact that he was interested in the visual properties of languages he didn't understand, but what they looked like, including a Japanese dictionary that he got from an exchange student that they had. So formally, he was interested in what the calligraphic mark looked like. And you can see it does look like a puzzle. To me, it almost seems like a manuscript page that was found in fragments and then all reconnected back together. And there's a wonderful mystery to these images. And you can look through and see both abstracted designs, but also things that seem to relate to either a human or animal or vegetable type of form. You have to make up your own story, though. They are puzzles that don't really completely fit together.
It was a real pleasure exhibiting John's work. You never knew what was going to come through the door. You always knew that it was going to be provocative. You always knew that there was nothing safe about it, and that it was going to be engaging.
As Himmelfarb's artistic life grew, his family life grew as well. His son, Forrest, born in 1979. His daughter, Serena, arrived 7 years later. He takes his role as a husband and father as seriously as he takes his art.
I think he's done a really nice job of balancing a very serious career with being a wonderful part of his family.
Forrest was barely 10 weeks old when Himmelfarb first broke into the New York gallery world in 1979. He remains active in New York shows today, most often exhibited by dealer Louise Ross.
I don't know if I've met anybody who can draw like John Himmelfarb can draw. I mean, it comes out of his head, just through his arm and in his hand and then out on the paper. It's almost as if he doesn't even have to think about it. I think he could be considered a very great artist. Quite honestly, I don't say that lightly.
Himmelfarb's prints and lithographs remain in demand for New York's premier shows.
What has struck me so vividly about John is his embrace of growth and change. So many artists find something that they're successful at and stick with it. And John was fortunate enough at a very young age to develop a very distinctive visual style and have success with it. So it would have been quite easy for John to spend an entire career producing Himmelfarb. But for John, that was just sort of the beginning, and it's been so exciting and inspiring to watch him grow and embrace new forms of creation.
By the mid-90s, Himmelfarb was well into his Inland Romance series. His inspiration, he tells students visiting his studio, his own urban neighborhood, Pilsen.
The industrial landscape, the bridges and railway yards and the scrap yards and all of that has fed a lot of my work. For me, a lot of art making is, attraction of it is its tactility. I love paint, just that physical act of putting paint on something. You can give me a bucket of paint and tell me to paint the wall. I'm happy painting the wall because I like the sensation of putting paint on things.
Himmelfarb moves easily from one medium to the next.
I've been doing drawings that related to the idea of language, the way people make marks to convey thoughts. So even in college, I had drawings that looked alphabetic, and some were calligraphic, some were more pictographic, hieroglyphic. I began compositions that I call icons now. And then at some point I saw that these characters could step out. You could take any one of 100 that appeared in a composition, take one out and have it stand alone as a three-dimensional object. At that point I drew them on cardboard, cut them out, and then used melted wax to build up the surface, give it more thickness, a little more dimensionality, and then I sent them out to cast.
Small icon sculptures at first, but after an unusual artist in residency program in a cast iron foundry, Himmelfarb's sculptures took on size.
When I went to Kohler cast iron foundry in 2007 for 3 months, I began making cast iron trucks. I'd work with plasticine or wax, then make a sand mold and cast it, and I was trying to get as large as possible while I was there. And I got one up to 6 feet long in a single casting, which was pretty large.
But not large enough. Himmelfarb wanted more. He wanted a real truck for his sculpture. His next creative adventure had begun.
I needed a real truck to get up to the scale that I wanted, and I searched first along roadsides, and I found a pickup truck for sale that had the kind of shape I was looking for, sculptural quality that I could relate to, and I had already an idea of using agricultural forms, agricultural implement forms, and so I got the truck where I could work on it, and then I started going to salvage yards, finding the shapes that I wanted, composing with them, and I was surprised at how much it was like painting in terms of moving things around. In a painting, the color's in the wrong place. If you got a yellow square and it belongs someplace else, you paint it out and you paint it someplace else. I didn't realize that I was going to be doing the same thing with the metal. You have a cylinder that's too big and it needs to go someplace else. You take it out, you move it, and I really enjoyed the physically moving these heavy objects from place to place and composing with them, because I like being in the work. I like the feeling of actually participating in these forms while I'm arranging them.
Himmelfarb stays in his work all the way to the gallery door. John Himmelfarb, fearless, prolific, secure in his vision, ready for the next challenge.